The massive crystal dome of the Galactic Council headquarters floated in the darkness of space, its transparent walls revealing the bustling activity within. Inside the main chamber, hundreds of beings from different worlds took their places around the circular seating arrangement that had been carefully designed to accommodate every known species in the galaxy. Ambassador Veltar of the Altaron delegation adjusted his ceremonial robes with two of his forearms while scanning the familiar faces around him. His people were known throughout the galaxy for their wisdom and patience, qualities that had served them well during their 3,000 years as council members. His large, golden eyes paused at the same spot they always did during these gatherings, an empty chair in the human section that had collected cosmic dust for over 2 centuries. The seat was crafted from Earth's own materials, a gesture of welcome that had been prepared when humanity first achieved faster-than-light travel. The blue and green cushioning was meant to remind human representatives of their home world's oceans and forests. Instead, it served as a constant reminder of the galaxy's greatest mystery. Commander Thex stomped into the chamber, his heavy boots echoing against the polished floor. The Kronax warrior's scales caught the artificial light, creating patterns of silver and black across his muscular frame. His people were the galaxy's premier military force, and their presence at these peaceful gatherings often made smaller species nervous. Thex dropped into his reinforced chair with a metallic clang that made several nearby delegates flinch. Another meeting, another empty human chair, Thex growled, his voice carrying easily across the chamber. Still no word from those silent primitives? Veltar turned toward the Kronax commander, his expression remaining calm despite his inner concerns. Nothing has changed, Commander. Our long-range sensors continue to detect activity in their system, but they maintain complete communication silence. No responses to any of our 2,847 official invitations, trade proposals, or diplomatic overtures. The crystalline being known as Zixtal chimed into the conversation, literally. The merchant collective representative communicated through harmonic frequencies that created beautiful musical tones. Universal translators converted these sounds into words that other species could understand, though much of the emotional nuance was lost in translation. My people's economic models have run countless simulations regarding the human situation, Zixtal sang in overlapping notes. Every analysis reaches the same conclusion. Species that isolate themselves for extended periods either collapse from internal conflicts or emerge as aggressively expansionist civilizations. There are no exceptions in galactic history. A small, furry delegate from the Whisper Worlds raised a tiny paw. Perhaps they simply fear us? Many species require extended adjustment periods before joining galactic society. Commander Thex snorted, a sound like steam escaping from a pressure valve. Fear? Their early spacecraft were already showing remarkable ingenuity when we first detected them. No, this isn't fear. This is something else entirely. The conversation was interrupted by the ceremonial chimes that signaled the official start of the council session. The massive holographic display at the chamber's center activated, showing the current galactic map with trade routes, territorial boundaries, and diplomatic relationships marked in various colors. A small yellow dot in the outer rim represented Earth's solar system, marked with the ominous red flag that designated it as status unknown. Council Speaker Mordun, an ancient being whose species had founded the galactic government millennia ago, raised his staff for attention. His voice, enhanced by the chamber's acoustic systems, reached every corner of the vast space. Honored delegates, we begin today's session with the standard review of pending applications and diplomatic situations. The holographic display zoomed in on various systems as he spoke. The Vorthan Empire requests expanded mining rights in the Kepler Nebula. The Aquatic Collective seeks mediation in their trade dispute with the Silicon Confederacy. And as always, we maintain our standing invitation to the human species of Earth. A murmur of whispered conversations rippled through the chamber. The human question had become a source of fascination and frustration for every species present. In a galaxy where communication was instant across thousands of light years, where trade and diplomacy connected the most distant worlds, one species remained completely silent. Veltar accessed his personal data pad, reviewing the latest intelligence reports from the region surrounding Earth's solar system. The information was troubling. Long-range sensors detected massive construction projects throughout the human system. Energy readings that didn't match any known technology. Most concerning of all, a complete absence of the interstellar communications that characterized every other spacefaring civilization. Speaker Mordun, Veltar said, rising from his seat. If I may address the human situation directly? The ancient council speaker nodded, gesturing for him to continue. My fellow delegates, we must acknowledge that the human silence represents something unprecedented in our galactic experience. Every species that has achieved interstellar capability has sought contact, trade, knowledge, or conquest. Humans alone have chosen complete isolation while simultaneously showing signs of rapid technological advancement. The chamber fell quiet as delegates considered his words. Even the usual background chatter of translation devices and communication systems seemed muted. Commander Thex leaned forward in his chair. What exactly are you suggesting, Ambassador? Veltar's golden eyes swept across the assembled representatives. I'm suggesting that we may need to reconsider our assumptions about human motivations. Perhaps their silence isn't primitive fear or simple arrogance. Perhaps they're planning something that we've never encountered before. The empty human chair seemed to loom larger in the sudden silence, a mystery that had puzzled the galaxy's greatest minds for centuries. The years had passed like pages in a book that no one wanted to finish reading. What began as curiosity about Earth's silence had slowly transformed into something much darker, genuine fear. The Galactic Council's greatest scientists, diplomats, and military strategists found themselves facing a puzzle that defied every model they had created over thousands of years of interstellar civilization. Ambassador Kelnara of the Zeltharian Council stood in her private quarters aboard the massive space station that served as the galaxy's diplomatic center. Through the transparent aluminum windows, she could see the swirling colors of the Andromeda Nebula, a sight that usually brought her peace. Tonight, it only reminded her of how vast and unknown the universe remained, even after all their technological advances. Her assistant, a young Zeltharian named Colwyn, approached with the latest intelligence reports clutched in his three-fingered hands. His normally calm demeanor showed cracks of worry that had become common among the council staff. Ambassador, the new sensor data from the Earth region has arrived, he said, his voice carrying the musical tones typical of their species. The results are more disturbing than our previous estimates. Kelnara accepted the data pad with one of her forearms while continuing to stare out at the nebula. Her people were known for their ability to remain calm under pressure, a trait that had made them excellent mediators in galactic conflicts for over 2 millennia. But the human situation tested even their legendary patience. The numbers on the display made no sense according to any known physics. Energy outputs that suggested construction projects spanning entire planets. Industrial activity that dwarfed the combined manufacturing capacity of a dozen major galactic civilizations. All of this happening in complete silence, without a single communication reaching the outside galaxy. How long has it been since their last observable spacecraft left their system? She asked. Colwyn consulted his own records. 47 years, Ambassador. The last human vessel we detected was a small exploration ship that approached the edge of their local star cluster before returning home. Since then, nothing has left their system and nothing we send gets a response. The silence stretched between them as both contemplated the implications. In a galaxy where even the most primitive spacefaring species sent out exploratory missions, trade expeditions, or at least desperate calls for help, Earth's complete isolation was unprecedented and deeply unsettling. 2 days later, the main council chamber buzzed with nervous energy as representatives from across the galaxy gathered for an emergency session. The usual pre-meeting conversations were subdued, replaced by worried whispers and anxious glances at the still empty human chair. Ambassador Kelnara took her position at the speaker's podium, her tall, graceful form commanding attention from the hundreds of delegates present. Her silver robes caught the chamber's lighting, creating patterns that seemed to flow like liquid mercury as she moved. Honored colleagues, she began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's advanced acoustic systems. We face a situation that has no precedent in our recorded galactic history. The human species has now maintained complete isolation for nearly 3 centuries while simultaneously showing signs of technological development that exceed our current understanding. Commander Thex of the Kronax delegation interrupted with his characteristic bluntness. What you're really saying is that they've become more powerful than us while refusing all contact. That's not mysterious, Ambassador. That's preparation for war. A ripple of concerned murmurs swept through the chamber. The Kronax were known for their military expertise, and their assessments of potential threats were rarely wrong. Kelnara raised one hand for quiet. Which is precisely why I propose that we take direct action. Not military action, she added quickly, seeing Thex lean forward aggressively, but diplomatic action. We must send a formal embassy to Earth's system to establish contact through direct presence rather than long-range communications. The crystalline representative from the Merchant Collective chimed in with harmonic tones that translated as concern. The risks of such a mission could be enormous. If the humans have developed defensive capabilities proportional to their apparent industrial capacity, our diplomatic ships could be destroyed before delivering their message. Then we send them with every possible peaceful symbol and communication device we possess, Kelnara replied firmly. We make it absolutely clear that our intentions are diplomatic, not military. We carry gifts, cultural exchanges, and formal invitations to join galactic civilization as equals. The debate continued for hours, but eventually the proposal passed with overwhelming support. Even species that rarely agreed on anything found common ground in their shared concern about the human mystery. 3 weeks later, a small fleet of diplomatic vessels departed from the Council's main starbase. The ships were chosen specifically for their non-threatening appearance and carried the most experienced diplomats the galaxy could provide. Captain Rixtar of the Vegan Confederation commanded the lead vessel, his reputation for peaceful first contact making him the obvious choice for such a delicate mission. The journey to Earth's solar system took nearly 2 months, during which the diplomatic team prepared for every possible scenario they could imagine. They studied human culture from the limited observations made centuries earlier, practiced greeting protocols in dozens of different formats, and loaded their ships with gifts representing the finest achievements of galactic civilization. None of their preparations proved relevant. As the diplomatic fleet approached the outer edge of Earth's solar system, their sensors detected something that made every crew member freeze in astonishment. A network of automated defense stations, sleek and clearly advanced far beyond current galactic technology, moved to intercept them with smooth precision. The lead station transmitted a message in perfect galactic standard, the universal language used for all interstellar communication. The voice was calm, professional, and utterly final. Greetings, representatives of the Galactic Council. Earth acknowledges your diplomatic mission and appreciates the gesture. However, we must respectfully decline contact at this time. Please maintain a minimum distance of 5 light-years from our system boundaries. Your cooperation in this matter is appreciated. Thank you for your understanding. Captain Rixtar tried to respond, to negotiate, to at least establish a dialogue. But the defense stations simply repeated their message and began moving the diplomatic ships away from the system with technology that made resistance impossible. Within hours, the embassy found itself back in interstellar space, politely but absolutely excluded from human territory. The emergency alarm echoed through the corridors of the Galactic Council headquarters for the 3rd time in 2 months. Delegates who had grown accustomed to peaceful meetings and routine diplomatic discussions now rushed to their chambers with expressions of barely contained panic. The human question, as it had become known throughout the galaxy, was consuming more time and resources than any crisis in recorded history. In the deep archives beneath the main council chambers, Dr. Yelmoth of the academic collective pored over sensor data that made his 6 eyes ache from strain. As the galaxy's leading expert on technological development patterns, he had been asked to analyze the readings coming from Earth's solar system. What he discovered challenged everything he thought he knew about how civilizations grew and changed. The numbers simply didn't make sense. According to his calculations, the energy signatures coming from human space suggested industrial activity that should have taken at least 2,000 years to develop, even with the most optimistic growth projections. Yet humanity had achieved this level of advancement in less than 3 centuries of complete isolation. His assistant, a young researcher named Peldana, approached his workstation with another stack of reports. Her usually bright purple skin had taken on a pale lavender hue, a sure sign of stress among her people. Doctor, we've received 17 new intelligence reports from various sources who attempted to scout the human system boundary, she said, placing the documents carefully on his cluttered desk. None of them were able to get closer than the 5 light-year exclusion zone, but their long-range sensors picked up some very disturbing information. Dr. Yelmoth looked up from his calculations, all 6 of his eyes focusing on his assistant. How disturbing? Peldana activated a holographic display that showed a 3-dimensional map of Earth's solar system. Red dots marked the locations of the automated defense stations that had intercepted every probe and scout ship for the past 50 years. The defense network has expanded, she said quietly. What started as a few stations around the outer planets is now a complete sphere surrounding their entire system. Our best military analysts estimate there are now over 10,000 defensive platforms, each one showing energy signatures that exceed our most advanced battleships. The old scientist felt a chill run down his spine. In all his years studying galactic civilizations, he had never encountered anything like this. Species either joined the galactic community and shared their technological advances, or they remained primitive and eventually died out. Humanity was doing something completely different and it terrified him. Meanwhile, in the main council chamber, the emergency session was rapidly descending into chaos. Representatives from hundreds of worlds shouted over each other, their various forms of communication creating a cacophony of sounds, lights and harmonic frequencies that the translation system struggled to process. Commander Thex stood at the center of the chaos, his massive form towering over most of the other delegates. His people, the Kronax, had built their reputation on military strength and strategic thinking. In his mind, the solution to the human problem was obvious and urgent. "You're all making this too complicated," he roared, his voice cutting through the noise like a blade. "No species in galactic history has ever developed this kind of military capability without planning to use it. They're preparing for war, and every day we waste in discussion gives them more time to build their forces." His armored fist crashed down on the council table with such force that the reinforced surface cracked. Several smaller delegates jumped back in fear, while others began shouting their own opinions even louder. Ambassador Kelnera moved gracefully to the speaker's podium, her calm presence gradually bringing some order to the chamber. Her people, the Zeltharians, were known for their wisdom and ability to see long-term consequences that others missed. "Commander Thex," she said, her ethereal voice somehow carrying over the remaining noise, "I understand your concerns and they're not without merit. But consider this question carefully, strike with what?" The chamber fell silent as her words sank in. Thex's expression shifted from anger to confusion, then to something approaching fear. Kelnera continued, her tone remaining steady despite the gravity of what she was about to reveal. "Our combined intelligence reports suggest that humanity's defensive capabilities alone now surpass the military strength of our entire combined galactic fleet. Their automated defense stations use technologies that our best scientists cannot even identify, let alone replicate." A small delegate from the Peaceful Worlds Coalition raised a trembling appendage. "Are you saying that if we did try to attack them we would lose?" The silence that followed was answer enough. Dr. Zixtal of the Merchant Collective chimed in with harmonic tones that sounded more discordant than usual. "My people's economic models indicate that human isolation is already affecting galactic trade patterns. 3 major shipping companies have rerouted their vessels to avoid the entire sector surrounding Earth's system. Insurance costs for any missions in that region have increased by 400%. Fear was spreading like a virus through the galactic community. Small species that had always depended on the protection of larger civilizations began making secret alliances and defensive pacts. Trade routes that had remained stable for centuries were abandoned in favor of longer but supposedly safer paths. Military budgets across the galaxy doubled, then tripled as every major civilization began preparing for a conflict they didn't understand against an enemy they had never seen. The Aquatic Collective's representative, speaking through a water-filled communication tank, bubbled out a question that everyone was thinking but no one wanted to ask. What if their silence isn't preparation for conquest? What if it's something else entirely? Commander Thex scoffed. "Like what? No species develops weapons this advanced for peaceful purposes. But what if they're not weapons?" Kelnera asked quietly. "What if we're so focused on our own fears that we're completely misunderstanding their intentions?" The question hung in the air like a toxic cloud. For the first time in galactic history, they faced a civilization that had grown beyond their understanding while choosing complete isolation. Every attempt to make contact had been politely but firmly rejected. Every probe or scout ship was turned away without violence but with technology that demonstrated overwhelming superiority. The human chair remained empty, but its presence had never felt more ominous. What had humanity become during their centuries of silence? And more importantly, what did they want? The 500th emergency session regarding the human question had begun like all the others, with fear, confusion, and no real answers. Ambassador Kelnera sat in her designated seat, reviewing the same intelligence reports that had puzzled the galaxy's greatest minds for decades. Around her, delegates from hundreds of worlds whispered among themselves, their conversations creating the familiar background hum of worry that had become the soundtrack to these meetings. Dr. Yelmoth had just finished presenting his latest analysis of the energy readings from Earth's system when every screen in the chamber flickered simultaneously. The holographic displays that showed galactic maps, trade routes, and military positions all went dark for a moment before displaying something that made every being in the room freeze with shock. A simple message appeared on every surface capable of showing images. The text was written in perfect galactic standard, the universal language used for all official communications between worlds. But more disturbing than the words themselves was the fact that they had appeared on systems that were supposed to be completely secure. Galactic Council, this is Earth. Thank you for your patience over the past 250 years. We are now ready to participate in galactic affairs. Please maintain current positions for a peaceful transition. The chamber erupted into chaos as delegates tried to understand what they were seeing. Commander Thex leaped to his feet, his hand moving instinctively to the weapon at his side, though he knew it would be useless against whatever technology could override every security system in the galaxy simultaneously. "How is this possible?" shouted Dr. Zixtal, the harmonic tones of the Merchant Collective representative becoming sharp and discordant with panic. "Our communication networks are protected by quantum encryption that should be impossible to break." But the message was only the beginning. Throughout the galaxy, on every major world and space station, people stopped what they were doing and stared at the sky. Space itself seemed to be changing, bending in ways that violated everything they understood about physics. The familiar stars wavered like reflections on disturbed water, and reality appeared to twist into impossible shapes. On the trade hub of Nexus Prime, cargo workers abandoned their loading duties as massive gravitational distortions appeared just beyond the station's defensive perimeter. The distortions weren't like the controlled jump points that ships used for faster-than-light travel. These were something entirely different, more precise and powerful than anything in known science. Captain Molvex of the Kronax Home Guard watched in horror from his command ship as the space around their military headquarters began to ripple like liquid. His sensors detected gravitational readings that exceeded the output of collapsed stars, yet there was no visible source for such immense forces. "All units, prepare for possible hostile contact," he transmitted to his fleet, though his voice betrayed the fear he was trying to hide. "Unknown vessels are approaching using technology beyond our current understanding." But when the distortions cleared, what emerged wasn't an invasion fleet in any traditional sense. Ships materialized throughout galactic space with perfect coordination, appearing simultaneously near every major population center, military base, and trade route. Each vessel was enormous, dwarfing even the largest dreadnoughts that the various galactic civilizations had spent centuries perfecting. Their hulls were smooth and dark, reflecting light in patterns that seemed to shift and change as observers watched them. The design was unlike anything in the galactic database. Where most ships showed the angular, functional architecture of military vessels or the flowing curves of civilian transports, these ships seemed to combine both approaches while adding elements that served no obvious purpose. Strange protrusions and geometric patterns covered their surfaces, creating an aesthetic that was both beautiful and deeply unsettling. Ambassador Kelnara stared at the tactical display that showed her home world, Zeltharia Prime. 3 of the mysterious ships had positioned themselves in orbit around the planet, not threatening but simply present, like silent guardians watching over everything below. Their energy signatures were so advanced that the monitoring stations couldn't even begin to analyze them properly. "They're everywhere," whispered Peldana, Dr. Yelmatha's young assistant, as she worked frantically at her data terminal. "Every major world, every important space station, every critical trade hub. It's like they knew exactly where to position themselves for maximum strategic effect." The old scientist nodded grimly, his 6 eyes moving between multiple displays that showed the same scene repeated across the galaxy. "This level of coordination suggests they've been watching us for a very long time. They know our civilization better than we know ourselves." In the council chamber, panic was giving way to a different kind of terror, the realization that humanity had just demonstrated capabilities that made resistance pointless. The ships weren't attacking, weren't making demands, weren't even communicating beyond that initial message. They were simply there, a constant reminder that Earth's long silence had ended. Commander Thex slumped back into his reinforced chair, his military training warring with the evidence before his eyes. "1,000 ships," he muttered, his voice barely audible above the chaos around him. "They deployed 1,000 ships simultaneously across the entire galaxy. Our best strategic planners said such coordination was impossible." The implications were staggering. For a civilization to position forces throughout galactic space with such precision, they would need intelligence networks that exceeded anything the Council had ever developed. They would need technology that made faster-than-light travel look like primitive rocket propulsion. Most importantly, they would need the industrial capacity to build and maintain a fleet that could effectively control every important location in known space. Dr. Yelmatha's calculations had been correct, humanity had developed far beyond anything the galaxy had seen. But even his most pessimistic estimates had fallen short of this reality. As reports flooded in from across the galaxy, one fact became clear to every delegate in the chamber. The human question had been answered, but the answer was more terrifying than anyone had imagined. Humanity had spent 2.5 centuries not hiding from galactic civilization, but studying it, learning its weaknesses and preparing for this moment. The empty chair that had symbolized humanity's absence now seemed to mock them all. Earth had never been isolated, they had been watching, waiting and planning for the day when they would reveal what they had become. The security systems of the Galactic Council headquarters were considered the most advanced in known space. Layer upon layer of defensive barriers protected the main chamber from any possible threat. Energy shields that could stop the most powerful weapons, detection grids that could identify a single molecule of foreign substance, and AI monitors that watched every cubic centimeter of space with constant vigilance. None of it mattered. The figure simply appeared in the center of the chamber as if he had always been there. No alarms sounded, no warnings flashed on security screens, no protective systems activated. The guards stationed around the room looked confused, checking their equipment to see if it had malfunctioned, but everything showed normal readings. Admiral Lee Min-ho of the Terran Federation stood calmly in the middle of the circular chamber, his simple dark blue uniform a stark contrast to the elaborate ceremonial clothing worn by most of the galactic delegates. He was tall for a human, with graying hair and eyes that seemed to hold centuries of knowledge despite his relatively young appearance. The chamber fell into absolute silence as hundreds of beings from across the galaxy stared at the first human they had ever seen in person. For over 2 centuries, they had wondered about Earth's mysterious inhabitants, creating theories and fears about what humanity might have become during their long isolation. The reality was both more and less terrifying than anyone had imagined. "Honored delegates," Admiral Lee began, his voice carrying clearly through the vast chamber without any technological assistance. "I am Admiral Lee Min-ho, speaking on behalf of Earth and the human species. We wish to apologize for our extended absence from your proceedings." Commander Thex was the first to recover from his shock, his military instincts overriding his amazement. The massive Kronax warrior leaped to his feet, his scales rattling with agitation as he pointed an accusatory claw at the human. "Explain yourselves," he roared, his voice echoing off the chamber's crystal walls. "This show of force, these ships appearing throughout our space without warning, what is the meaning of this aggression?" Admiral Lee turned toward the Kronax commander with an expression of patient understanding. He raised one hand in a gesture that seemed both peaceful and somehow commanding, causing Thex to pause mid-sentence. "Commander, what you perceive as a show of force is actually a demonstration of capability," the human said calmly. "We understand that our sudden appearance has caused concern, but we felt it necessary to prove that our intentions come from a position of strength, not desperation." Ambassador Kalnara found her voice, though it trembled slightly as she spoke. "You said you studied our civilization. For how long?" The human's eyes met hers directly, and she felt as though he was seeing not just her but understanding her in ways that made her uncomfortable. "We have been observing galactic civilization for the entire 250 years since you first detected our primitive spacecraft. We received every invitation, every trade proposal, every diplomatic overture you sent our way." Dr. Zixtal chimed in with harmonic tones that translated as confusion and fear. "If you received our communications, why did you never respond? Why maintain such complete silence?" Admiral Lee walked slowly toward the center of the chamber, his movements relaxed and unthreatening despite the chaos his presence had created. "Because we were studying you. Learning from your successes and, more importantly, from your failures." The chamber erupted in angry voices as delegates demanded explanations, but Lee continued speaking as though the outburst hadn't occurred. His voice somehow carried over the noise without becoming louder. "We observed your endless cycles of conflict over resources that should be abundant. We watched species destroy themselves fighting over territory in a galaxy with billions of uninhabited worlds. We saw civilizations rise and fall because they could not solve the fundamental problems that plague all societies: scarcity, inequality, and the concentration of power in the hands of those least suited to wield it." Commander Thex slammed his fist on his chair. "So you decided you were better than us? That you could solve problems that have existed since the beginning of civilization itself?" For the first time, Admiral Lee smiled, and the expression was both kind and deeply unsettling. "We didn't decide we were better, Commander. We decided to become better. Rather than join a fundamentally flawed system and perpetuate its problems, we chose to solve those problems first." The silence that followed was broken by a small delegate from the Peaceful Worlds Coalition. "What do you mean when you say you solved them?" Lee gestured toward the displays that still showed the massive human ships positioned throughout galactic space. "While your civilization spent centuries arguing over the division of limited resources, we developed technologies that make scarcity obsolete. While you struggled with political systems that concentrated power in the hands of the few, we created governance structures that prevent such concentration from occurring. Ambassador Veltar, who had watched humanity's empty chair for decades, finally asked the question that everyone was thinking. And the ships? The 1,000 vessels that appeared simultaneously across our galaxy? Admiral Lee's expression became even more gentle, as though he was explaining something simple to a child. Those are not weapons, Ambassador. They are gifts. The chamber erupted again, but this time the voices carried confusion rather than anger. Each of those ships contains complete technological and social databases, Lee continued when the noise subsided. Everything we have learned and developed during our isolation. Manufacturing techniques that can create any material from basic elements. Energy generation systems that can power entire worlds without environmental damage. Governance protocols that have eliminated conflict, poverty, and oppression from human society. Dr. Yelmoth, who had spent years trying to understand the energy readings from Earth's system, raised a trembling appendage. You're offering to share all of this? With everyone? The human nodded. We didn't spend 250 years building a better civilization just to keep it to ourselves. The question that now faces this council isn't whether humanity belongs in galactic society. The question is whether galactic society is ready to evolve beyond its current limitations. Admiral Lee's eyes swept across the chamber, meeting the gaze of delegates from hundreds of worlds. We offer you the choice to move beyond scarcity, beyond conflict, beyond the petty struggles that have defined galactic politics for millennia. But the choice must be yours. The silence that filled the vast chamber was different from any that had come before. It wasn't the silence of fear or confusion, but the silence of beings contemplating a future they had never imagined possible. The empty chair that had symbolized humanity's absence for centuries no longer seemed important. What mattered now was the choice that would define the galaxy's future.